A boot crashed into a woman's stomach. She folded forward into the dirt, both hands wrapped around her belly. A man stood over her, breathing hard, his fist raised for another blow. She tried to crawl away. He grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked her back hard. Her scream cut through the afternoon air. Nobody moved. Doors stayed shut. Curtains stayed drawn. People who had been laughing only minutes earlier now stared down at their boots. The man drew his arm back and swung again. His knuckles caught her jaw. Then a shadow stretched across the dirt behind him. Spurs. Slow, deliberate spurs. A tall cowboy named Eli Crane stepped off the boardwalk and walked straight toward them. He didn't draw his pistol. He didn't shout. What he said in the next 10 seconds would change 2 lives and end a third. Stay with me on this one. He had ridden into town an hour earlier with dust on his shoulders and a mare that needed water. That was all he wanted. A trough, a meal, a night under a real roof, and gone again at dawn. Eli Crane was not the kind of man who looked for trouble. He had seen enough of it in his life to know what it cost, and he had paid that price more than once. The town was called Drabone Crossing, set down in a hard piece of Wyoming country where the wind came off the plains and never quite stopped. There were maybe 40 buildings. A general store, a bank with a sagging porch, a church with no preacher, 2 saloons facing each other across the main street like fighters who had grown tired of each other but couldn't walk away. The kind of place a man passed through and forgot unless something happened there worth remembering. Eli had tied his mare to the rail outside the general store and was crossing back toward the boarding house when he heard the first scream. He stopped in the middle of the boardwalk. Most men, when they hear a sound like that, look at each other first. They check to see if anyone else is going to do something. They wait for permission. Eli didn't wait. He turned his head and listened. The second scream came 30 feet down the street, behind a freight wagon. Then a man's voice, low and ugly. Get up. Get up, you worthless. And then the sound of a fist on flesh. That was when Eli stepped off the boardwalk. He didn't run. He didn't draw his pistol. He walked the way a man walks toward a job he doesn't want but isn't going to refuse. His spurs marked time. The street was crowded enough that people saw him coming. They watched him pass and didn't say a word. A man on a porch lowered his eyes. A woman pulled her child back into a doorway. Nobody warned him off. Nobody told him to mind his business. They just watched the way people watch when they already know how something is going to end and don't want to be a part of it. Now here's the thing about Eli Crane. He was 43 years old. He had fought in the war as a boy and come home with a bullet still inside him, lodged against a rib where the surgeons had been afraid to dig. He had worked cattle from Texas to Montana. He had buried 2 brothers and 1 wife. He had killed 3 men in his life, and every one of them had needed killing, and every one of them still came to him in dreams. He was not a man who enjoyed violence. He was a man who had made his peace with it. He came around the freight wagon, and that was when he saw them. The man was big, military big, thick neck, crew cut showing under a sweat-stained hat. He stood over the woman with his shirt half open and his face red from drink and rage. The woman on the ground was small, not just small in size, small in the way a person gets when they have spent a long time being made small. Her dress was streaked with dirt. Her lip was split, and under her hands, pressed flat against her body, was the curve of a child that had not been born yet. She looked maybe 20 years old. The big man's name was Cyrus Mott. Eli would learn that later. He would also learn that Cyrus owned the freight company that ran out of Drabone Crossing, that his brother wore the sheriff's badge in this town, that he had buried 1 wife already, and nobody asked too many questions about how she died, that the woman on the ground was named Sarah, that she had been his wife for 2 years, and that everyone in this town knew what he did to her and nobody, not one of them, had ever stepped between them. But Eli didn't know any of that yet. What he knew was what he saw. A man hitting a pregnant woman in broad daylight, in front of 40 witnesses, with the easy confidence of someone who had done it before and gotten away with it every time. That was enough. A leather-bound prayer book lay in the dirt near Sarah's hand. It had fallen from the pocket of her dress when she went down. A pressed wildflower stuck out from between two pages, the petals dried and pale. Eli's eyes went to it for half a second, then back to Cyrus. "Mister," he said, "you'd best step away from her." Cyrus Mott turned slowly, the kind of slow that's meant to be a warning. He looked Eli up and down, taking in the dust on his coat, the simple gun belt, the lack of any badge or marking. He saw a stranger, just a stranger, and he smiled. "You'd best keep walking, friend," he said. "This here's a family matter." It stopped being a family matter the moment I heard her scream. Sarah hadn't moved. She lay curled on her side in the dirt, her arms still wrapped around her belly, watching the two men with an expression Eli would think about for the rest of his life. She wasn't begging him to help. She wasn't telling him to leave. She was looking at him the way a person looks at someone they don't quite believe is real, like he might disappear if she blinked. Cyrus took a step toward Eli. "Mister, I don't know where you come from, but in Drabone, a man handles his own wife. You understand me? I understand you fine. Then walk. Touch her again," Eli said, "and you'll bleed." 8 words, spoken flat, no raised voice, no drama, just a fact delivered the way a man tells you it's going to rain. Cyrus blinked. His smile slipped a little. He had expected an argument. He had expected someone to back down. He hadn't expected a man to talk to him that way. He pulled the Bowie knife from his belt. It was a big knife. 12 inches of steel, the edge polished bright, the kind of blade made for skinning game and intimidating men. He held it low and let it catch the sun. He'd done this before. He knew exactly how it looked. "You think you're going to bleed me?" Cyrus said. "Stranger." Eli didn't answer. He took 2 steps forward instead. He didn't reach for his pistol. That surprised Cyrus more than anything else. A man with a gun should reach for it. A man without a knife should be backing up. Eli did neither. What happened next took maybe 4 seconds. Cyrus lunged. The blade came in low and fast, aimed at Eli's gut. Eli stepped inside the arc, caught Cyrus's wrist with his left hand, and drove his right elbow up into Cyrus's nose. The cartilage gave with a sound like a chicken bone snapping. Cyrus's head jerked back. His grip on the knife loosened. Eli twisted the wrist hard, the way a man twists open a stuck jar, and the knife came free. Then Eli put his boot into the back of Cyrus's knee and drove him down into the dirt. Cyrus landed face first about 2 feet from Sarah. He tried to get up. Eli put a knee in his back and pressed the Bowie knife against the soft place behind his ear. "Listen to me real careful, Cyrus." He had heard the name from a man on the porch a moment earlier. "I told you what would happen. You came at me with a knife. By every law I know, I could open your throat right here and no jury in the territory would convict me." Cyrus was trying to breathe through a broken nose. He made a noise that wasn't quite a word. "But I'm not going to do that," Eli said, "because that woman over there is carrying a child, and I'm not going to let her remember the day her child was born as the day she watched a man die in the dirt in front of her. You hear me?" A nod, jerky and small. "Now I'm getting up, and you're going to stay down. And she's coming with me, to the doctor, and after that, wherever she wants to go. And if I see you within 50 feet of her ever again, this knife and you are going to have a longer conversation." Eli stood. He kept the knife. He shoved it into his own belt. He turned to Sarah. She hadn't moved. Eli knelt beside her in the dirt and put a hand under her elbow. Slow. The way you approach a horse that's been beaten too many times. "Ma'am," he said, "can you stand?" She nodded. She couldn't speak yet. He helped her to her feet. She came up shaking. The prayer book was still on the ground. Eli picked it up and gave it back to her. She held it against her chest like it was the only thing in the world she still owned. The street was completely silent. 40 people, maybe more, standing on porches and in doorways. Nobody clapping. Nobody cheering. Nobody saying a word. Just watching. Some of them ashamed. Some of them afraid. A few of them, Eli could tell, hating him for what he'd just done. Not because they thought it was wrong, but because his courage had reminded them of their own cowardice. He walked Sarah across the street toward the small building with a hand-painted sign that read Doctor. He didn't look back at Cyrus. Cyrus was getting to his hands and knees in the dirt. Blood was running out of his nose down his shirt. He was staring at Eli's back with the kind of look that promises a long memory. The doctor was a thin old man named Greaves who had seen Sarah before. He didn't ask any questions. He nodded once at Eli, took Sarah by the shoulders, and led her into the back room. Eli stayed in the front office. He sat down on a wooden bench by the window. He listened to Greaves's voice through the wall. Quiet, steady. The kind of voice that has talked many women through the same thing. After a while, Greaves came back out. He looked tired in a way that wasn't about the day. "Baby's all right," he said. "She's bruised. Cracked rib, maybe. She'll keep the child if she stays off her feet. She can't go back to him." "No," Greaves said. "She can't. I'll get her on a stage in the morning. Anywhere she wants. I'll pay." Greaves looked at him a long moment. "Mister, you don't know what you just did." "I know exactly what I did." "No," Greaves said quietly. "You don't." Eli let that sit. Then he stood up, tipped his hat, and walked across the street to the saloon. He had skipped his meal and his bath. He still had dust on his shoulders. He wanted 10 minutes with a glass of whiskey and a chair against the wall before he figured out the next step. He pushed open the saloon door. Men inside looked up and looked away. He found a table in the back. The bartender brought him a glass without being asked. The whiskey was rough and warm. Eli took a small sip and set the glass down. The Bowie knife sat across his belt. The afternoon light came through the dusty window slow and gold. For the first time in 2 hours, his shoulders dropped. The saloon door slammed open. A boy of maybe 12 stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes wide. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. Every head in the place had already turned. "Mister," he said, looking right at Eli, "you better run. Sheriff's coming. And he's bringing 4 men with him." Eli set down his glass. He stood up slowly. He thanked the boy with a nod. The boy bolted back out into the street and was gone. Eli looked around the saloon. 12, maybe 15 men in there. Not one of them met his eye. He turned to the bartender. "Sheriff's name?" The bartender swallowed. "Mott. Garrett Mott. Brother to Cyrus." "Yes, sir." Eli stood there for a second. He didn't curse. He didn't show anything on his face at all. He had walked into a town owned by one family, and he had just put the family's head in the dirt in broad daylight in front of 40 witnesses. The sheriff wasn't coming to keep the peace. The sheriff was coming to settle accounts. This was no longer about one man and one woman. This was about an entire piece of country that ran on the say-so of the Mott brothers. The freight contracts, the mortgages, the lease on the saloon Eli was standing in, the courthouse and who ran it. Everything in Drabone Crossing was paid for by or feared the Motts. And Eli was now standing inside their machine with a borrowed knife and 1 revolver. He walked out the side door of the saloon, not the front. He came out into the alley between buildings, kept his hand near his pistol, and moved toward the doctor's office, watching every window and every roofline as he went. He found Greaves in the front room. "We have to move her." "You can't move her. She needs." "Sheriff's coming." "The sheriff is his brother. There's no law in this town that's not theirs. If they take her back, she's dead inside a week." Greaves stared at him. Then he said quietly, "Backstairs. Up to the spare room above the surgery. She can stay there. Nobody but me goes up there. Hide her now. Lock the door. If they ask, you haven't seen her since you cleaned the dirt off her face." Greaves nodded. Eli helped Sarah up the back stairs himself. She moved slow. She held the prayer book against her chest the whole way. At the top, she turned to him. "Mr. Crane," she said. Her voice was rough but steady. "He'll kill you. He'll try. He's killed before. So have I." She looked at him a long moment. She didn't argue. She went into the spare room. Greaves locked the door behind her and put the key in his vest pocket. Eli came back down the stairs. He walked out the front door of the surgery and into the middle of the street. The sheriff and 4 deputies were already coming down the boardwalk toward him. Garrett Mott was older than Cyrus and harder. He didn't have his brother's bulk. He had something worse. He had patience. He walked with a star on his chest and a Colt on his hip and a small, neat smile on his face. The 4 men behind him were freight hands. They didn't wear badges. They didn't need to. Eli stopped in the middle of the street. He kept his hands at his sides. "Sheriff." "Stranger." Garrett's voice was light, almost friendly. "I'm told you assaulted my brother in front of half the town. I'm here to collect you and your story both. Your brother was beating his pregnant wife. I stopped him. He pulled a knife. I took it off him. Be that as it may, the charge is assault. We'll let the judge sort it out. The judge is your cousin, I expect." Garrett's smile didn't move. "He is, in fact." Eli watched the 4 men spread out behind Garrett. Slow, professional. He counted distances. He counted angles. He counted seconds. Then he said, "I'll come with you, Sheriff, but not your way. Your way? I'm dead before sundown and the woman's dead by morning. So here's how we're going to do it. You and me ride to the territorial marshal in Cheyenne. 2 days east. Your boys stay here. Your brother gets nowhere near that woman. That's not how the law works, friend. It's how the law works today." Garrett's hand drifted toward his pistol. Eli was faster. Not because he was fast in some legendary way. Because he had already made up his mind, and Garrett was still deciding. Eli's pistol came out of the holster and the hammer was back before Garrett's fingers had touched leather. The 4 freight hands froze. "Don't," Eli said to them. "I will put 6 men down in this street, and I will not lose any sleep over it." Garrett's hand stopped where it was. "Take that badge off, Sheriff. Set it on the ground." Garrett didn't move. Eli took 1 step closer. "Take it off." Garrett unpinned the star slowly. He set it down in the dirt. Eli walked forward, picked it up, and pinned it to a wooden post outside the surgery. He left it hanging there. "That's where it belongs," he said, "until there's a man worth wearing it. If you're still with me on this one, and I hope you are, hit that subscribe button. There's more stories like this one coming, and I want you here for every one of them." He kept the pistol on Garrett. He backed toward the surgery door. He kicked it open behind him with his heel. "Greaves," he called. "Bring her." No answer. He glanced into the surgery. The back room door was open. Greaves was on the floor, blood on his temple, breathing but unconscious. Sarah was gone. Eli came back out of the surgery slow. He looked at Garrett. He looked at the 4 freight hands. Something had changed in his face, and they all saw it. "Where is she?" Garrett shrugged. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Where is she?" "Stranger, you've got a gun on a sheriff in the middle of a public street. I'd suggest you." Eli shot him in the leg. The Colt boomed. Garrett went down screaming, hand clamped on his thigh. The 4 freight hands started to draw and stopped, because Eli's pistol was already pointed at the nearest one's chest. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Eli said. "Where did your brother take her?" "The freight yard," one of the hands said immediately. He was the youngest of the 4, maybe 20. "Out past the South Fork. He took her about 10 minutes ago. He had men with him. 3 of them. You're going to walk over to the livery. You're going to tell the boy to saddle every horse you've got. Then you're going to wait inside the livery until I come back." "If I come back?" "Yes, sir. The rest of you get the sheriff to the doctor. He'll live if you hurry. He won't if you don't. Eli walked past them to the rail where his mare was tied. He swung up. The horse felt the urgency in his weight and stepped out at a trot before he asked. He went to a gallop at the edge of town and didn't slow until the freight yard came into view. The Mott freight yard was a half-mile out past the south fork of the creek. A long barn, a bunkhouse, 2 corrals, a wagon shed. The land was flat and open, with sage and scrub broken by a few cottonwoods along the creek. Eli pulled up behind a stand of cottonwoods 200 yards out. He climbed down. He pulled his Winchester from the saddle scabbard. He checked the loads in his pistol. He pulled the Bowie knife from his belt and set it on a stump beside him for one long second, looking at it. Then he put it back. He could hear shouting from the barn. A man's voice. Cyrus. A woman crying. Sarah. He moved on foot through the sage, low and quiet, the way he'd moved in the war when he was 19 and didn't know what he was going to live to be. He used the cottonwoods. He used the corrals. He came up to the back of the barn without being seen. 3 men were in front watching the road. 1 on the porch of the bunkhouse. 2 by the barn door. They were watching for a rider coming hard. They weren't watching for a man on foot coming through the sage. Eli put the first one down with the Winchester at 60 yards. A clean shot through the right shoulder. The man dropped his rifle and screamed. The other 2 by the barn door came around. They had pistols. The pistols were no good at 60 yards. Eli worked the lever and put one through the second man's thigh, the other through the third man's gun arm. 3 shots. 3 men out of the fight. He didn't kill any of them. Not yet. The barn door slammed open from the inside. Cyrus Mott stepped out into the yard, dragging Sarah by the hair. He had a pistol in his other hand. He pressed the barrel against her temple. "Stranger," he shouted, "I know you're out there. You come out, or I splatter her across the wall right now." Eli stepped out from behind the cottonwood. He set the Winchester down in the grass. He raised his hands. He walked forward into the open yard. "Easy, Cyrus. Drop the pistol." Eli pulled his Colt slow with 2 fingers and set it down in the grass. All of it. The knife too. Eli pulled the Bowie knife from his belt and set it down. He stood up. He kept his hands where Cyrus could see them. "You don't have to do this, Cyrus. You can ride out of here. You can be 100 miles east by morning. Shut your mouth." Cyrus walked Sarah forward, the pistol still at her temple. He was 20 feet away. 15. 10. His face was a mess. Dried blood under his nose. One eye swelled almost shut. He was breathing hard through his mouth. "I'm going to kill you slow," he said. "I'm going to kill you in front of her. Then I'm going to kill her. And then I'm going to ride into town and burn everything that helped you down to the ground. You can try. You think you're a hero, mister?" "No," Eli said. "I think I'm a man who told another man what would happen. And now it's going to happen." Cyrus laughed. It was an ugly sound. He pushed Sarah aside hard. She fell into the dirt. He raised the pistol at Eli. That was the second he should have shot. He didn't. He wanted to talk. He wanted to enjoy it. Eli moved. He didn't reach for the Colt or the rifle. They were in the grass. He went for the Bowie knife instead, dropping his shoulder, snatching it off the ground and coming up with it in one motion. Cyrus fired. The shot went over Eli's shoulder. Eli was inside Cyrus's reach before the second shot. He took Cyrus's gun hand at the wrist. He drove the Bowie knife up under Cyrus's ribs. He felt the blade go into the hilt. Cyrus's eyes went wide. The pistol fell out of his hand into the dirt. "I told you," Eli said quietly. "Touch her again, and you'll bleed." Cyrus tried to say something. Blood came out instead. His knees folded. Eli let him down slow. He pulled the knife out and let it fall. Cyrus Mott died in the dirt of his own freight yard with his own knife beside him, looking up at the sky. Sarah was on her hands and knees 10 feet away. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just breathing. Eli walked to her slow. He knelt down beside her. He put one hand on her back, careful, the way you put a hand on a wounded animal that stopped fighting. "Ma'am, you're all right. You're all right." She nodded. She couldn't speak yet. He helped her up. He walked her back across the yard, past the 3 wounded men who lay groaning in the dirt, past Cyrus's body, and over to where his mare was waiting in the cottonwoods. He lifted Sarah into the saddle. He climbed up behind her. He held her with one arm. The other hand held the reins. He turned the mare back toward town. She spoke once on the ride. "He was going to kill the baby." "I know," Eli said. "I know he was." They rode in silence the rest of the way. When they came back into Drabone Crossing, the street was crowded again. Word had moved faster than Eli had. The freight hand from the livery had told what he saw. Garrett Mott was alive, but in no shape to do anything about it. The doctor had been found and brought around. Someone had taken down the sheriff's badge from the post outside the surgery. People stood in the street and watched the cowboy ride in with the pregnant woman in front of him. Nobody spoke. Eli rode through them at a walk. He brought Sarah to the boarding house. The woman who ran it opened the door and put both hands over her mouth and then opened her arms. Sarah went into them and finally cried. Eli stood outside on the porch for a long time after that. A man came up the steps, older, white hair. He introduced himself as the territorial judge the cousin Garrett had mentioned. He had ridden in from his ranch 2 miles east when the news reached him. "Mr. Crane," he said, "I've heard what happened. I figured you would. 3 witnesses on the street will swear Cyrus Mott drew a knife on you this morning. 6 more will swear he beat his wife in public. The freight hand who rode in says Cyrus had a gun on her and was threatening to kill her when you arrived. By every law I know, you acted in defense of yourself and her both. That's how it was." The judge looked at him a long moment. "You should have come to me before." "With respect, sir, I didn't know there was a you to come to." The judge nodded slowly. "That's a fair answer. And it's something I'll be thinking on for a while." He went inside the boarding house. Eli sat down on the steps. Somebody brought him a cup of coffee. He drank it slow. In the morning, the stage came through Drabone Crossing at 6:45. Sarah was on it. She wore a clean dress somebody had given her. The boarding house woman had packed her a small bag. The prayer book with the pressed wildflower was inside. The judge had paid her fare himself, all the way to her sister's place in Colorado, and had pressed an envelope of money into her hand for whatever came after. Before she climbed aboard, she came to Eli. She took the prayer book out of the bag. She held it out to him. "I want you to have this. Ma'am, that's yours. It's the only thing I own, and I want it to belong to you for a while. And when my baby is old enough, I'll come find you, and you can give it back." Eli looked at her for a long moment. He took the book. He nodded once. "I'll keep it safe. Mr. Crane, what you said yesterday. Touch her again and you'll bleed." She paused. "Nobody ever spoke for me like that before. Nobody. I know they didn't. My whole life. Not my father. Not my brothers. Not the men in this town who watched it happen for 2 years. Not one person ever said those words for me." Eli didn't answer. He didn't know what to say. He tipped his hat. She climbed onto the stage. The driver clucked at his team. The coach pulled out of Drabone Crossing in a small cloud of dust and was gone over the rise inside of a minute. Eli stood there a while longer. Then he untied his mare. He swung up. He rode east out of town the way he had come in. He passed the post outside the surgery. The sheriff's badge was gone. Someone had taken it down in the night. The new sheriff, when one was appointed, would not be a Mott. Eli didn't look back. The story of what happened in Drabone Crossing that afternoon was told around campfires and in saloons across the territory for the next 30 years. The details changed in the telling the way they always do. Some versions had Eli kill all 6 men in the street. Some had him as a federal marshal in disguise. Some had him riding off with the woman behind him. Most of them got the words right, though. Touch her again and you'll bleed. That part everybody remembered. Sarah Mott reached her sister's place outside Pueblo, Colorado, 3 weeks later. She gave birth in the spring. It was a boy, healthy, loud, dark-haired. She named him Eli. When the boy was 9 years old, an old cowboy with white in his hair and a long way behind him rode up to her sister's place on a sorrel mare. He had a leather-bound prayer book in his saddlebag. He had kept it 9 years, and it was time to bring it home. The boy met him at the gate. "You're him," the boy said. "Yes," the old cowboy said. "I am." He climbed down off the horse and he gave the boy the book. The pressed wildflower was still between the pages. It was a quiet afternoon. Nobody got hurt that day.